Welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood. I'm your host, Maureen Spielman. And today I wanted to come on solo and do an episode around creativity because I think it's a topic that is becoming more and more important because so many of us are awakening to parts of us that we weren't so familiar with and our inner creativity. And if you're like me at all, you may have misidentified yourself with not being a creator or being creative or having a relationship to your creativity for many years of your life. If you learned this like I did, or had some idea that you were only partly creative or not as creative as the next person, or as if there was a competition or something was better or not as good as based on that old paradigm of things being right or wrong or good or bad. None of it was true. And I hope this episode is for you as much as it is for me. And if you've always considered yourself to be creative, then I say, how beautiful is that? Because that must have been nurtured some point in your life. But I think this is for you too. I think there's something in this episode for everyone. And I think it's important too. I've watched my own transformation with what I thought creativity was. I think it kind of parallels with intelligence in a sense where we think like, oh, they're more intelligent. No, it's just that no one is more anything than the other. And I'm not here to argue that or not, but I'm just here to say if we're each a unique divine expression of who we are meant to be and who we came to be, then we have these gifts and talents and birthrights in us just because we exist. So I love that. So as you know, I know the listenership is wide. So I was going to say for women in the middle of their life who are recreating or going back to who am I really? This can be for the younger individual as well, because most of us have lost our sense of who we truly are, and it's a rediscovery. So I noticed like where I did not think I was creative at all in many, many ways. And I have such compassion for that version of me who, for decades upon decades, did not know that I was a creator, I was a manifester, and I was capable of doing these things. And I think putting a lid on it just wasn't going to be working for me anymore, so I'll stop with that there. But I realized that even in creating Mystical Sisterhood or writing these episodes, those are creative endeavors. Writing in your journal is creativity. And so when we really tap in and become aware of how that creativity flows, I think it's a really important part of the process. And, we talk a lot. I know I'm covering a lot of things, but we also talk a lot about ritual. And when we set an intention and we're in the moment, the moments of our lives become so much deeper and so much more meaningful. So I'll say that, but humanity is coming alive and we are becoming more present to all of our gifts, not only reserved for a few, but for all of us. I love that so much. And it's also it's for women to be in touch with the truth of who they are, the truth that we are creativity and we are expression. We're here to express. I love it for all of us. I feel that throughout out life. Also, the topic of sort of like labels and being labeled comes up. And I'm not really one for labels unless, of course, it's working for you. But through the process of labeling or having been labeled as kids, someone else basically names your truth for you. And I think as we awaken into our lives and into adulthood, we say, does that really fit? And I love the process, even though it's kind of like it's work to unburden ourselves from the labels given to us, but it's so essential. And that's why I think I was always attracted to the work on almost like deconditioning ourselves or being in touch with how deeply conditioned we truly are, and then giving ourselves permission to come out of that conditioning and say, like, who am I? So that's why this episode on creativity and being creators and this inherent part of us is special to me because I think there's so much here for all of us. So I kind of like was looking up other words correlated with creativity, and the words that I loved were imagination, which is a gorgeous gift from the universe, self-expression, inspiration, vision or visionary, artistic, originality, resourcefulness, genius, inventiveness, being clever, ingenuity, invention, idea. I wanted to put those out there because often, like even in this episode, I'm using a lot of the word creativity, but these all can kind of sort of like go hand in hand with one another. And we all sort of wake up when we hear, certain words in there. Like, what is your specific genius? Are you like quick to formulate ideas? Do you get many ideas? Do you feel like you're artistic? Do you feel like part of your creativity is within your visions? Does the word inspiration inspire you? Whatever it is, I just like to put a lot of words out there because you're going to resonate with what you do. And so maybe you replace creativity with imagination or self expression or whatever it is. So I always go back to, and mystical sisterhood, I think one of the tenets and foundations is that each of us is such a unique individual, more than we ever imagined, more than we ever know. And we have our own mind, our own body, our spirit, our cellular makeup, our body composition. And, couple that with our really, I said the word spirit, but our soul and our soul's journey and just the beautiful alchemy of all those things I just listed working in tandem to come through you as that expression is so exciting for me. And that's why I love to be alive and in this time of awakening so we can really just be in the work together and support one another and all those things that mystical sisterhood is always interested in. And being part of this sisterhood is being so invested in what this next woman is doing in order to bring her light and her gifts to light. I love that. Yeah, I just the celebration of our unique signature. Perfect. So I wanted to go back and go to some of our childhood experiences and programming. I bet you any amount of money that you were playful as a child and you were born with innate gifts. They were part of you. And I was thinking that those gifts, they can be suppressed, but they can't be taken away. So even if they're a part of you, a part of us that's been dampened down, then they're just there to be rediscovered. They're a part of you. You can't take it away. So your self expression through your early playful self existed. And to me, that's evidence that you are creative. Even if you identified with being a quieter child, how did you create through your play? I think this is really a cool topic. How did you play? What did you play with? Of course, this was our generations, right? Where that's all we did. We really expressed ourselves through play. And I'm thinking of Sophie Sheesh and Katie Hendricks on an episode not too long ago in their podcast, Be, Play, Love, and how we're here to play. So let's revisit. What did you do when you were young? For me, I grew up with my four sisters, and Barbie dolls were absolutely a big part of our childhood. And we had all these Barbies, and we would dress those Barbies to the nines. We would just pick their outfits and let them express. We use them to express ourselves. No wonder they always use dolls like in psychotherapy, child psychotherapy. But those dolls also would have interactions. They would have dramas. They would have conflicts all playing out in doll land. And it was great joy. I'm thinking as I say this, it brought me a lot of joy. And so I think tapping into what is that feeling of joy that you associate with, like what brings you joy when you go to create it? And so that's a great question. So how did you express yourself when you were young? I think it's fun to take a trip down memory lane. I'll use some from my own childhood. Perhaps you made little clearings in the woods and swept away the dirt and set up logs for your own little home. You invited kids over to that said fort and played for hours using your imagination. Think about this. Think about if you have misidentified your creativity, if you think about yourself in those childhood roles, it's fascinating to peer into how you used to express yourself in these ways. So those were all creative. Maybe you set up towns in your basement where friends played, shop owners, and you always chose to run the pet store or run the bank. again, creativity. Maybe you like to play in the dirt. I've heard many adult women say like they just loved playing in the dirt. And then now they love to garden. They love to be in nature. Also, very creative expressions. Perhaps you doodled, you drew, or you painted a lot. So creative. That's more of a traditional creativity. But also, I was just talking to my daughter, Sarah, about it. And she remembered how I asked her the question, what did you do? How did you play when you were young? And I don't think she played with the dolls as much as I had. And she said, Mom, I always used to doodle. And there were these great books and they were called Rosy Flow and they were so fun. And she could do those for long periods of time. And I've always heard that what could you do where you kind of get lost in what you were doing? These can be clues to where, like when we revisit it, like, oh, maybe I am this creator that Maureen's talking about. So, yeah, there's all these clues, and I'm curious. I want to hear, how did you play? What did you do? And what did you create? So, now I want to talk about this idea of what I'm calling lost creativity. So, if all of this is true and we are these creators, why do so many adults feel at a loss as how they are creative? Because you are all of these things and more. So, I believe that when we embarked on our school journey, when we became school age, we lost as much of our, I want to say, relationship with moving all the time like we did when we were like from birth to 6 years old or 5 years old. And we sat in chairs and we sat in schoolrooms and we learned to memorize a lot through history, through math, through science. And yes, there is creativity in those processes. But if you think about like the vast array of individuals coming through school systems, we all create so differently and in our own unique way that, of course, that a lot of us are going to get, squashed down like our creativity. And also, I think when I was writing this episode, I was in touch with the fact that when I was young, I think because we had art classes, if a child could not do the art that was being assigned, then that was probably like a breeding ground for the belief systems that I am not creative. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it's probably true for a lot of us. I have seen with my kids that they have to take so many requirements in high school. When you get to high school, the high school has these beautiful classes, but they can't take them because there's so many requirements. And I've found that unfortunate because yes, the options are there, but you can't take them because another kind of pathway, like with the honors classes and things like that, are being kind of highlighted more than what do you want to study? How do you want to express yourself? And now with the phones, there's also an extra wake up call back to this creativity because so much of our time is being spent on digital, and on our phones. So getting back, I think a creativity episode is like, what lights you up? What makes you feel alive? What do you want to bring to life? It's these soul fulfilling things that we've gotten away. I always think about this now is like iPhones were introduced in 2007. And like when they first came, we knew what we were losing. We knew, especially if you were raising kids, what was being lost in terms of the play. And now we are 17 years later. And I feel like where at first it was like, what are we going to do about this? What kind of interventions? And then it kind of like got out of our hands in a sense. And even I will be transparent and say, my attention span's not as good as it used to be to do anything really. I always talk about like reading fiction. Reading fiction can be a creativity, but I think right now I would say like it's 17 years later than the iPhone was introduced, and now it seems like a time in history, given kind of like the fever pitch things have gotten to with our inability to attend, that it seems crucial and vital that we reclaim our birthright to create. So seems important to say. So now that we've seen lost pieces of our creative selves, you may be believing that, oh yeah, I am more creative. Maybe I want to be spending more time, in fact, being creative. It's your birthright. And I know you have something to say about it and share of it. So now If you look back at how you created when you were young, anything that you're getting back in touch with, let's link it up to what might be called to be coming forth from you now. I can look back now and think that I was just playing, but then I think about it and I think like, oh wow, all of my kind of like my preferred way of playing and being was, when I'm talking about Barbies, was creating a lot of scenarios, creating communication, creating expression of self. And if you were more a person who worked with your hands, or, are you being called to create in that way again, whether it's drawing or painting or manipulating cooking with food, creating flower arrangements. And I'm also thinking about if you were into nature, is it gardening? Did you use the written word more or the spoken word when you were a child? It doesn't have to be a direct correlation, but I think it's fascinating to think about. So I think it also, creativity feels like it dovetails nicely with purpose. So if you are, I don't know, like either considering a new line of work or a new line of expression, how does your creativity want to come through? So mine has largely come through the spoken word and on the podcast, and my knowing that now my creativity lies in the questions I ask, let's say, or the guests I choose, and all these different ways that it's like, oh, the person next to me starting a podcast wouldn't choose the same people I do. So we must like be really self-honorous and appreciating, oh, that's the special way that I do that. That's the special way that I do that no one else can do it. And I don't say that about myself, but that's for all of us. What's the special way you do it? And what's your special way that you're bringing things to the world? So I just think that they're all clues to feed into what we want to spend more time doing, maybe opening up into our work. And these are not just things you do and are labeled by, but they're part of who you are, and they're part of your essential creative energy. I believe that self-expression can come in infinite ways. And it's always, always, always taking up new residence on the earth and never seen before expressions of creativity. So I guess it's just that invitation to really identify yourself as that creator being, and realizing that we are all creative no matter what we were conditioned to believe. We are being called to not only look at the conditioning, but I was thinking recently of the spells that we're under and just like breaking those spells. And it's such a beautiful gift to be able to have these parts of ourselves reawaken and share with each other and share with humanity. I think also that just the fact that these things are our birthrights, they're what we are born with. And, we're shedding, we're getting rid of a lot that doesn't belong to us. And I was talking about that in episode 54, uncovering your birthrights and embracing your essential truths. And, if we can understand where these beliefs came from, then we can question them and we can transform them into something new. So if I know that one of my early experiences was feeling grossly inadequate in art class, then I can and look at that and really start to question its truth. And I love doing this work with each other too, because if we share a part of ourselves and part of our not enoughness in whatever category it is in our life, we can have the other reflect back to us and question whether that's really the truth or not. That's why I love doing the work with each other. I believe friends, family members, and clients transform these old belief systems into new channels of creation. So, as I finish here, I'm going to ask you, what brings that childlike wonder in your life? When do you feel inspired? What memories do you have of your own upbringing, your own creativity? Does it come through creative dress? Is it, I don't know, creating, gosh, remember like collages when we were young? I think we only do those in the form of vision board these days, but going to a pottery class, doing one of those pottery painting classes, creating, like if I think about the avenues for the work I'm creating in the world, creating workshops for women, creating get-togethers, dinner parties, whatever it is. It's all creation, and it's the unique expression of you that I want you to really tap into and honor and appreciate yourself for, because there's only one you, and it's pretty darn beautiful. I love seeing it in all of us. I recently started a group called Creator Connections. It's Mystical Sisterhood Creator Connections, and it meets every other week. I'll put it in the show notes. But the reason I wanted to do it was because I saw a lot of women starting businesses and having, I think, a lot of creative hits and things they wanted to bring out in the world. And I also saw friends and family members wanting to bring side passions or hobbies or something that might grow into something bigger to life. Yet we often are alone in these things. I mean, I may have said it before, but when I work as a solopreneur, I'm in my house a lot alone. So being in group with each other to discuss our creations, share resources, inspire one another, put it out into the universe, what we're thinking about in a safe space, a safe, inspired space. I can think of nothing more powerful and energetic for us to be in community together. And I'm already excited by what's coming from it. And it just started in early May. And so check that out in the show notes if you'd like to join us, or email me at hello Maureen Spielman. I really am so, as part of Mystical Sisterhood, so into just women coming alive and really realizing our own gifts. So I'm going to leave it at that today. And let me know what you think of this episode. Cheers to the ways that creativity is seeking to flow through you and either be solely for yourself or the larger collective of humanity. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks as always for being here. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit MaureenSpielman.com or MysticalSisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.